Chicago, 2011. A cop is murdered. Police and prosecutors swear they have the trigger man. He swears he didn't do it. How far will each side go to prove they're right?
Like it's just one bombshell after another, where you're like, what?
The story of a PlayStation, a brain-eating amoeba, and the relentless pursuit of justice. Off Duty, out now. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
This message comes from Jackson. Taxes aren't something you can only think about once a year. With investments, planning for tax day is year-round. Fortunately, Jackson offers tax-efficient products. Visit jackson.com for more information on how our products can make your tax bill a little bit less painful. Jackson is short for Jackson Financial Incorporated, Jackson National Life Insurance Company, Lansing, Michigan, and Jackson National Life Insurance Company of New York, Purchase, New York.
Howdy, howdy, ho, and welcome to Fantasy Fan Fellas. I'm Hayden, producer of the Fantasy Fangirls podcast and your resident lover of all things Sanderson.
And I'm Steven, your bookish internet goofball, but you can call me the Smash Daddy.
And we are currently deep diving Brandon Sanderson's fantasy epic, Mistborn. But here's the catch. Steven here has not read Mistborn before.
That's right, hey. So each week, you'll get my unfiltered, raw reactions to every single chapter.
And along the way, we'll do character deep dives, magic explainers, and Steven will even try to guess what's next. Spoiler alert, he'll be wrong.
Newsflash, I'm never wrong. Episodes come out every Wednesday, and you can find Fantasy Fan Fellas wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, and welcome back to the Psych Legal Pop Podcast. This is a podcast where we talk about popular culture through the lens of an attorney and a therapist. I'm Brooke Brigham, and I'm the attorney.
And I'm Tess Brigham. I'm the therapist.
So today we are going to talk about the Murdaugh Murders.
We spent about 5 minutes before we started debating, do we say Murdaugh?
Yeah.
How do we pronounce this last name?
The pronunciations of this guy's name are all over the place.
I don't think anybody really knows the proper pronunciation, and I don't think the people in the family do either.
Well, I heard him, he was in court, and they asked him to state his name, and he said Alexander Murdaugh.
Okay,
but I think that's with a Southern accent. So if you take out the Southern accent, it's probably Murdaugh. It's not Doc, like people have been saying. There's no
saying that.
O-C-K in there. And yeah, his name's Alexander, but sometimes people call him Alec.
But it's really Alex.
It's really Alex.
So that's also weird, too.
Whatever. You know who we're talking about.
Yeah. Well, I also have another question that maybe is really a stupid question, but what is low country? Explain that to me. Okay. What is low country?
Low country, now this is very rudimentary. And ironically, our mother's mother is from Beaufort, South Carolina.
She is, yes.
And so she was born and raised there in the Low Country, and then she hightailed it off to college and then to New York City.
Well, it was very scandalous because she married our grandfather, who was a foreigner and a Yankee. A Yankee foreigner,
a German immigrant, and Jewish.
But they did like him.
They did not like him.
Oh, they did not like. I thought they kind of liked him towards the end there. After maybe in the beginning they didn't.
In the beginning they pretty much disowned her.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, it was not popular, but I don't think she cared for it there.
Yeah.
But anyway, the Low Country is this area on the coast of South Carolina where, normally we're used to beaches and coastlines here where the water just meets the land, But this is a coastline where the water between the ocean and the land, there's kind of like this area that's kind of, I don't even know how to describe it. It's kind of swampy. It's got these rivers and it's got islands, and the islands, have been built up to be connected by bridges, and people live on these different islands. And but it's surrounded by this waterway of rivers, and it's to me it looks, I don't mean to be offensive. I don't know how else to explain it. It kind of just looks like swampy, like these islands in a swamp.
Okay.
Anyway, but it's a whole culture. Like there's this old, I think it's called the Gullah culture that,
See, I always thought all of that was connected to Louisiana and New Orleans, but I guess I'm wrong.
I mean, It could be. I think they have a similar type of
because the bayou, and all of that, and
right?
That,
but it's different than the culture in South Carolina.
Yeah,
but yeah, they call all these communities, on the coast there, the Low Country. And frankly, I don't know how they're not underwater with global warming. I mean, they're very out there.
Well, that's good to know, because I kept thinking, like, what do they mean by Low Country? Like, do they mean Low Country meaning the South? Like, are we talking about the whole United States and the South? Talking about low, yeah. So now that makes a lot of sense. See?
It's that section of
we are learning something already.
That section of South Carolina. So anyway, so there's this family, the Murdaughs, who, for 100 years or so, their family basically ruled Hampton County, which is one of the counties down there, and they were very, very powerful. They held the position of solicitor. So Alex's great-grandfather was the first. It was Randolph Sr., starting in 1920. He was the solicitor of the 14th Circuit, Hampton County. And basically a solicitor is a prosecutor or a district attorney. And then his son became the next Randolph Jr., who they called Buster.
Buster, yeah.
And then Alex's father was Randolph III, and he was the last to serve as solicitor. Alex never made it to be a solicitor.
Okay, so explain this. This is the other thing that I'm very confused about. So they're solicitors. So is it in the Low Country in Hampton County? The way it works is they don't have DAs and prosecutors.
Well, that's just what they call their prosecutors.
Okay, so it's their solicitors. But here, when you're a DA, you don't also have a private practice where you're taking on other cases, right? Your sole job is prosecuting. And so in this situation, you can be a solicitor or a prosecutor, but you and your firm can take on anything else. Like, I'll take on the other side. I can take on this side. It just kind of feels like the way it works is if you're an attorney, you can be on both sides. You can do civil and criminal, and which I know that attorneys now can do civil and criminal. It's just not, people usually pick a lane and stay in it.
Well, yeah. And I don't understand quite how this came to be, because it's full of conflicts, obviously, because you have a solicitor who's deciding who gets charged with a crime and what crime, and are they going to get the death penalty and all this stuff. And meanwhile, their family members are working in this big law firm. And also, so the way that the solicitors get picked, the way the judges get picked, the judges are not elected. The solicitors are elected, but judges are not elected. They're basically picked by the General Assembly, which is like their legislature, which is just a bunch of lawyers.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a very small community, so people are moving around, like in between, this law firm that was started by the Murdaugh family. So you got people working in the same family, working in the law firm, working as the solicitor, and probably judges too. I mean, they're working it from all sides. And so it's very cozy and, exchanging favors. And the judges are beholden to these lawyers, not the people. They're not elected by the people. So they controlled the law by representing people, but also prosecuting people in a way to help manipulate the outcome. They just had their hands in everything. And there was all these deals, whatever. So they were a very, very powerful, to say the least, family, and wielded their power quite freely. And people were afraid of them and knew that if they crossed them, then that was not going to be good. And so they pretty much got away with whatever they wanted to do.
Yeah. Well, in the beginning of the first episode of the Netflix documentary, they kind of do the beginning of the episode 1 they kind of give you a little bit of an overview. And one person says there's 5 bodies in 6 years tied to this family.
Yeah.
Which is insane when you think about it. And I've seen some other things that it's not just these 5 bodies, that there have been some more that are, not even the ones that were covered in the Netflix. Because there's lots of murders they cover in this Netflix documentary, but apparently more from years and years and years ago.
Well, yeah, and even murders that were sanctioned by the government. The judge in this murder trial, he said during the sentencing, he basically said, for 100 years, your family has, let me see if I can find the exact quote because it's so good. He says basically that for 100 years, this family has, sent people to death row, and many of them for lesser crimes than what Murdaugh was just convicted of. So, that says it right there. So yeah, they've killed a lot of people.
They have,
in and out of the legal system. Yeah, allegedly.
All right. So do you want to just sort of dig into the Netflix, or do you have anything else to mention?
Well, no, let's just, we can talk about things as they come up. Yeah. But basically this starts out with talking about Paul Murdaugh, who was the younger son. So Alex was married to Maggie. They had 2 boys, Paul, and then one who they called Buster. I'm not sure what is his legal name? I don't know.
It's got to be either Alexander or Randolph. Like it seems, I think it's like Randolph Alexander. I think everybody who's named Randolph goes by Buster. And a friend of mine, Lisa's from Georgia. And anytime she talked about, these names are these Southern names, like Rhett, there was Doc, there was this person, that person. There was always these crazy names that you're like, nicknames that people had that were bizarre.
So they first focus on Paul, who at the time, it looked like he was in high school when they started telling his story. Yes. And a lot of the story is told by his former girlfriend, Morgan. And, so there was a group of kids. There was Morgan and Paul, and then there was Mallory and Anthony were a couple, and then Connor and Miley were a couple. Yeah. And Connor and Anthony cousins?
Yeah, and Miley and Mallory were best friends from pre-K. Then Morgan comes in. Then Paul and Tony are friends. So these are all people that have known each other for forever, since they were little kids. It seems like Morgan was sort of the one kind of sort of outsider whose family's from Long Island.
Oh, yeah, she moved there later.
And she must have moved there when she was in junior high or beginning of high school.
Yeah.
But they were all this interconnected friends, and they were these 3 couples essentially that spent time together and hung out together.
And Paul, let's just be quite frank, he drank excessively. All the time, just.
And the parents
blackout drunk. Oh, and the parents didn't care.
Parents were fine with it.
There was no boundaries. All the parents drank with their kids, partied with their kids. Morgan talked about, they had this big watermelon festival, which is in Hampton County. And the law firm, which is this big, huge, grand building, would sponsor it. And they'd open up she said they'd open up the back door, and all the teenagers would come in, and the adults would just start...
Alec being one of them.
Yeah, Alec being one of them. The adults would just start giving them booze. And so it was encouraged. And Paul was a big, big, heavy drinker. And he was a mean drunk.
Yes.
A really nasty drunk.
Well, we learn about, because Morgan talks about this, that they had these very different families, very different experiences, that when she started dating Paul, that they had, a tremendous amount of money, and they would go to these basketball games. They would go to vacations. They would go here, they would go there, anywhere. And it was always centered around heavy duty drinking, and heavy duty drinking by Paul. And they said that when, in Paul's kind of life, Morgan gets into this, right? Paul's childhood, his life is very sad. When you hear it, that his mother didn't seem very interested in him.
His mother favored Buster.
Buster didn't really like Paul. Paul was the one who, and I have some other feelings about Buster, but Paul was the younger kid who, I think my guess would be, was maybe a little more sensitive and a little bit sweeter. And he was essentially raised by their housekeeper, which we'll get into Gloria. And Gloria was his mother in many ways. But if you can imagine, here's a kid who, who has had, just seeing where his life went, you're like, okay, yeah, I can see that, because Paul didn't have a chance.
Well, yeah, because
he really didn't.
Morgan said that Paul was the black sheep. He was considered a disappointment. Maggie was detached from him.
But the kid's like 14, 15.
Oh,
How can you be a disappointment at 14, 15? You're just in high school. Like, what disappointment?
Well, and Buster wanted to follow in his dad's footsteps. He went to law school. Although he was expelled from the University of South Carolina for plagiarism. But was that law school or undergrad?
Well, I just heard something today, because I was listening to it on the way over, that apparently, I thought that was in college, but apparently it was law school. Something happened in law school that got him kicked out, and that one of the jailhouse tapings that they had of Buster and Alec when he was behind bars was Alec was saying to Buster, hey, I worked it out for you. He still got connections to be able to go back to law school.
Oh, of course.
You just need to keep your grades up in that. And apparently Buster told him, I don't know if I want to do this. So I think the thing when we call disappointment is, I think, again, because Buster was also in high school too at this time, I think Buster played the game. I think Buster said, yeah, Daddy, I want to be a lawyer just like you. Look at me go. And I think Paul, maybe the sweet, sensitive kid, was like, maybe I don't want to do that.
Well, I think Paul was numbing. I think all this. I think all this drinking was just pure numbing.
Yes,
and he was reckless, and he was always getting in trouble. But when he got in trouble, all he had to do was call his grandfather Randolph and his dad, and they showed up and they made it go away. Like they talked about even before the boating accident, a time where he wrecked his truck, and Morgan was in the truck, and she tried to call 911. He's like, what are you doing? And he called his dad and his grandfather and his mom, and they all came out, cleared out all the beer cans and all the guns. Apparently there was a bunch of guns in the truck, and cleaned it all up before the cops could get there. And I mean, can you imagine as a parent, like your teenager?
Yeah.
I mean, what chance do they have? And why in the hell would you accept that?
Well, and so that's why when you think about the death of Mallory Beach, it's like, this isn't on Paul's hands. This is on Maggie and Alec and this entire Randolph, all of you. It's all on your hands. Not just for the way you handled it afterwards, but beforehand, because there were so many moments in time. The Mallory thing didn't need to happen, because there were time and time again where they could have reined that kid in and been like, here are the boat, give me the boat keys, give me the car keys, no phone, go to rehab, go into a program, get some therapy, any of that. But that's our way of thinking.
But also that would be too shameful.
Yes. But that's not their way of thinking. Their way of thinking is, let's just cover it up and let's sweep everything under the rug and cover it up and make ourselves look good, and then just keep plowing forward.
Yeah. As if nobody's noticing.
Yes.
So anyway, in 2019, this is the fateful boat accident. And so the six of them, the three couples, they're going to an oyster roast somewhere out in the Low Country. They get on a boat. So that was another thing. Alex and Maggie had a river house, they called it, which
was that Moselle?
No, Moselle was the big compound. The compound, the hunting compound, but they lived there. Yeah. So they had a river house that was on an island, probably a private island, like on this river down in the Low Country near Beaufort. And I think the place, when they went to the oyster roast, I think it was in Beaufort, or they stopped there on the way back and went to a bar. And that's another thing. It's like, okay, so they took the boat because apparently Paul knew that there was going to be road checks. So he wanted to take the boat to escape the road checks. And so they're all drinking. None of them could or should have been driving the boat. Yeah. But they, and then they stopped at a bar in downtown Beaufort. I mean, it's like, how old are these kids and how are they going to bars?
Well, and they go back and show, so just really quickly, because there's so much information and so much to go through, but like just the dynamics of everything that was happening, because Morgan's parents had no idea how Paul was treating her. Like apparently
he was abusive.
He was very abusive. He had an alter ego named Timmy. When he drank, you know, he was a sweet kid, but when he drank, he became Timmy and he became just a raging, abusive asshole. And so what happened was that Miley, who's one of the friends, Mallory's childhood friend, said she hated Paul. She could not stand Paul, but would endure it because of Morgan. And Mallory tolerated Paul. And then the other two guys, you know, that Paul was their friend, but they also hated this version of him.
Why are they hanging out with him?
So that was the other part of it too. It's like, you know, and I think Morgan and Paul had been broken up at this point, but she was going back and forth. Like, you know, she couldn't leave him. Like I think that he would do something awful. They would break up. And then I think he would come back, show his sweet side again. And she would get caught up back into it again. And again, these are 19-year-old kids. I mean, they're 19 years old. But you can see a lot of video of them walking up to the boat, and just the dynamic of you watching the whole group of how in love Tony and Mallory were. You know, obviously who knows what would have happened to them in the future, right? Like, life is complicated. But at that one moment in time, you could see that Paul was like walking on his own, very, very drunk. Mallory and Tony are really in love. And then the other friends are just kind of trying to get home. You can see these dynamics so clearly in all the videos. But yeah, they take the boat out and then they finish at the oyster roast. They pack up. They all want to go home. All they want to do is go home. Everyone keeps trying to tell Paul, don't drive the boat. Don't drive the boat. And then Paul and Connor insisted on going to this bar. And that's my other thing too. They're 19. So are they? So, but we also saw on camera, what was caught on camera was Paul, before the party began, before they went to the oyster roast, he used Buster's ID to get alcohol. So they saw all of it, like him with the alcohol.
They knew how much, that's the thing. They knew how much he'd been drinking. And this is this really scary part, is that you can tell people don't, you know, never ever get in a car or a boat or whatever with someone who's drinking. But these guys, they saw how much he was drinking and they knew it was wrong. They knew they shouldn't have done it, but they did it anyway. And that's what is so scary. And also, look, I've done some partying in my life. I went to UC Santa Barbara. Okay. I am not like some, you know, goody two shoes. I was shocked at the level of drinking and partying and just sort of this, like, I mean, having access to a boat and just driving around and going here and going to a bar and doing
I think
the entitlement of this lifestyle, or this.
But I think it's that lifestyle. But I also think, listen, someone can disagree with me if I'm wrong. But I also want to say that the people that I've known over the years that are from that area, like there was a friend of my husband's who they're both from Louisville, Kentucky. And for them, my husband would tell me stories of them, like when they were in their younger years, but 30s, you know, early 30s, late 20s, of like them making these big cups, to-go cups of like bourbon and Coke, you know, up like a big giant McDonald's cup of that, and like taking it like a to-go cup, you know, in the car and putting that. So I think that is very culturally, come at me if I'm wrong, but culturally, I think it's much more of sort of like how it is out here in the Bay Area, where you can smell weed everywhere, kind of like people are smoking weed and people kind of know, and it's just like, meh, no one really cares. I think out there drinking and boating, drinking and driving, I think all of that is very, very common. And I think because there are probably no buses or anything that are going to take you anywhere, I think I doubt there's an Uber that goes out to that whole roadie. That what was called, like a roadie. Like roadies are very common. And I'm not saying it's just out there. People do this everywhere. But I think there is something culturally about that atmosphere. But you've got 19-year-olds who nobody has a fully formed brain. But I mean, giving kids booze inside your fucking law firm? No, I'm not condoning that. That's terrible. I know, but it's shocking to me. And I feel, that's what I'm saying. I feel like, you know, I'm being a prude or something. And I am not, you know, I mean, but I don't know. This is a whole nother level. Yeah, this is a whole other level. And I think that that's what Morgan and maybe these other kids saw too, because their parents weren't condoning this. It was Paul's parents that were condoning it. And I think there is something when you're 17, 18, 19, whatever, and you can't legally drink yet, that there is some appeal to the parent that will let you, you know, do that. But anyway. All right. Anyway, well, so
after going to this bar, they get in the boat. And I think at first somebody else was driving, but then Paul says, this is my fucking boat. I'm going to drive, get out of my way. And they're telling him, no, you shouldn't be driving. But he wouldn't take no for an answer. And so he started driving the boat and then started driving crazy. And he would leave the wheel unattended. And, one of the other guys would have to come in and take over. And then he'd come back and make him, leave. And he was just, acting crazy. And then finally he crashes the boat into a bridge.
But right before that, everybody who kept trying to, this was the other part of it too, with the other kids that I feel for them in that moment, which is everyone kept like Connor, Tony, they kept trying to interfere. They kept trying to grab it. And that Morgan said something to him and he turned around, spit in her face and slapped her. And Miley says that was it. Like Morgan could not, that it was finally confirmed that this was happening. Because very quickly, she told a story earlier where she talked about how they went to Buster's graduation. So this must have been high school. Yeah. Went to Buster's graduation. They were at a hotel. Paul was so drunk, he kept kicking her. And then he got on top of her and
tried to choke her
and then punched her really hard, like in the leg. I mean, it was bad, really, really bad. What this girl was going through, and her parents had, and her poor parents are like, they had no idea, the extent of it because she wasn't telling them. So anyway, people were trying to help, they were trying to stop him.
So he crashes into this bridge. Everyone goes flying except for, I think Morgan was the only one who didn't, or maybe not. Some of them went flying out of the boat.
Tony, remember because in the second episode, we hear from one of the heroes, the attorney for the Beach family. And he talks about that because they get a forensic person to come in to do that. So Tony and Mallory went flying. They both went because they were in the back of the boat. They in the front of the boat. They were in the back of the boat. And so because the boat went up, they went flying out. Connor hits the side there. That's how he rips his cheek open. And then I think Paul had the least amount of injuries. Of course.
It's always the drunk person.
Paul and Miley, I think, had the least
kills someone, but they're just fine.
Yeah. Anyway.
So yeah, I'm sure what happened. Mallory never came up. She probably hit her head and was knocked unconscious she hit her head and drowned. So Anthony, her boyfriend, is desperately searching for her, going underwater, trying to find her. And then, finally the paramedics, whoever show up. And there's a part where Anthony tells one of the police officers there, what does he say? He says, talking about Paul, because I think right away Paul was trying to blame Connor for he was the one driving. And Anthony was telling the police officer, he's like, do you know who that is? He's like, do you know Alex Murdaugh? And he says, good luck. Because knowing that, that Paul is not going to be held responsible for any of this. He's telling him this like at the scene.
But yeah, he's already trying to. And
Alec is the one who called. Okay, immediately Randolph and Alex show up at the. I guess they show up at the hospital. They immediately Alec calls Connor's parents and tells them that Connor was driving, and Alex tried to get to Morgan. He tried to get inside her hospital room. He was just saying, I represent her. And she's like, keep that man away from me. And they were there. Randolph and Alex were there, like already trying to cover things up, trying to get to the other parents. And
mind you, no one has called Mallory's parents.
No one has informed them that their daughter is missing.
And no one, and Alex and her father, nobody, they do not care about finding Mallory.
No, they don't want her found.
Obviously the rescue team and the diving team, Tony, who keeps diving back in, they can't get him off that. Everybody else, every single person that was part of this is like, we have to find Mallory, except for Paul and his father and his grandfather.
Yeah. And they said that, Mallory had an Apple Watch. They could have pinged the Apple Watch to find her location. They could have done something. Yeah, they didn't want her to be found because if there's no body,
no crime.
Then there's no crime. And it's just absolutely disgusting. And
but the nurse, what the other thing is, because Morgan's mom is a nurse and she's a nurse. So it was like another nurse walked up to her and said, like, nurse to nurse here, like, we know each other, that Paul was a nasty drunk, because all these stories start coming out that they took him like 15, 20 minutes at the scene to get Paul just to get in the ambulance.
Right. He
must have been a goddamn nightmare.
They said his blood alcohol level was 3 times the limit.
Yeah. Unreal. So they show up, they start getting it. And one thing that was really heartbreaking for Connor, which I really felt for him, which was Connor starts to panic, like, oh crap, they're going to put this on me.
Yeah.
And am I going to go down for this? And then his other fear was, are they going to kill me?
Right. Well, luckily, the Mallory's family hired this attorney, Mark Tinsley.
Yes, Mark Tinsley is the hero of this. He's my favorite person.
He put together all the evidence to prove that Paul was the driver. Mm-hmm. He's the one who said that Paul knew there would be traffic stops, so he wanted to take the boat.
He hires the forensic engineer to figure out the placements of the boat and where people would end up. And this is where they get into that whole thing about, they show the video of Paul buying the alcohol. They show all of it. Mm-hmm. They show the picture of him like funneling 6 Natural Light beers, which is so disgusting. Natural Light, funneling all this alcohol, all of that.
Yeah. And the police didn't even question Paul.
Yeah. Never questioned.
They never questioned him. All the wagons circled and came in and protected him. But
because the lead investigator was this guy, Michael Brock. And Tony told Brock, Paul killed my girlfriend. He said that. Tony directly said to this officer Brock, mm-hmm. Paul killed my girlfriend. And the audio recording wasn't in evidence. They just started burying evidence, anything at all. Officer Michael Paul Thomas was he was a DNR agent. He's the best friend of Alex's brother, mm-hmm. John Marvin. He was another investigator on the scene. And
they called him the Murdaugh's bitch.
Yes. And then he starts calling this guy Austin Pritchard, who's interviewing the kids at the hospital. And then while all of these kids are in the hospital, they're helping basically move the boat. So the boat is evidence. The boat mm-hmm. is the murder, this is part of this investigation. And the Murdaugh family was able to go in and get the boat removed. Like get rid of it.
Yeah.
Or get onto it and get rid of evidence.
Yeah. So Paul was charged, but he was not arrested or booked until he was 20 at the time.
But never in handcuffs, never in the orange jumpsuit, never had to spend a minute in a jail cell.
When he was arraigned, they took his picture, his quote unquote mugshot, and while he's in a polo shirt, in the courtroom. It was a $50,000 bond.
Wow. Yeah, which is nothing.
Nothing. That's $5,000.
Nothing for these people.
And basically everybody in the case had to recuse themselves, pretty much like all the judges, prosecutors or whatever, because who is going to try this?
Oh, well, the other thing is they show you this attorney for the beaches. They talk about the night of the crash and they have all of the phone records of everybody. And it was all these calls from the Murdaughs, like calling each other, calling this officer, calling this.
So, and Paul calling his parents, and nobody calling the police.
Nobody calling the police and nobody calling Mallory's parents.
Right.
I mean, the Mallory's parents say that we never got a call from a police officer.
No, they heard about it through somebody.
Some friend.
And they had to drive down to Beaufort, not even knowing what they were going to find there, not even knowing where to go. And they said just kept driving until they saw police cars.
Yeah.
And then, this is just...
But I have to say, this person that they hired, this biomechanical engineer who used movements of the body and physics to figure out the positions of the people on the boat related to their injuries. We were talking about this. I was like, wow, that is amazing that there are people out there that can do that. Yeah. I'm really impressed by all of it.
That's science.
That's science. Mm-hmm. Yes. I was just like, wow.
Good old physics.
So Paul pleads not guilty. Mm-hmm. And no trial date is set.
No, he's just kind of hanging around. So now we're into 2021. He's moved into a cabin on the Moselle estate, whatever you want to call it.
And Morgan, this is enough for Morgan.
He's still partying.
He's still partying like there's no tomorrow.
He's still having run-ins with the law.
Yeah.
Even though he's out on bail for, homicide.
Mm-hmm.
and this was around the time where Buster was expelled for plagiarism too. So things aren't.
So yeah, USC. Well. So it's University of South Carolina for plagiarism. So he must have gotten in trouble. So did he get in trouble in college and in law school? It seems like.
Oh, for plagiarism?
Yeah.
Probably. Who knows? I don't even know. But also around the same time, Maggie starts to realize that bills aren't being paid. And I think she's suspecting that something is up. She consulted with a divorce lawyer. She hired a forensic accountant. So
life is not good.
Life is not good. So this is early 2021. And then the murders take place on June 7th, 2021.
Is it June 7th? Not July 7th? I wrote that down wrong. Okay. Never mind.
I don't know. I wrote June. I don't know.
No, you could be right.
So what do I have here? So yeah, I don't even know how to explain.
So it's so hard. You know what it is? And I thought the Netflix documentary did a good job. What's hard is that there's okay, this is Alex's story.
Right.
And then there's okay, this is what then the police did. And then there's okay, then the people who are actually honest are going to come in and tell you what really happened.
Right. Well, let's be clear from the beginning. Alex was not, he was not arrested. He was not treated as a suspect. Law enforcement kind of went silent.
Yeah.
Like they kind of didn't know what to do.
There were no press conferences.
There was no information.
You have a double murder on a property and there's no manhunt, look out for this vehicle. Nothing. What are you going to do about this? What are you going to do about that?
It was like the police were doing nothing or they didn't know what to do. He turns into a victim, his wife and his son are murdered and he's just kind of going about his business. And and he has this, what he thinks is this airtight alibi, that he says he took a nap.
Which I thought was so weird. It's 7:30 at night. Why would you take a nap? Unless you are going to go to a rave that night, there's most likely you're going to be I'm just going to power through and then go to bed at 9. That's what I do.
So he was napping during all of this. Then he woke up and he went to go visit his parents. And he told the caregiver at one of their places, if anybody asks, I was here for 40 minutes when he was actually only there for 15 or 20 minutes. That's what she testified to in the trial. But so this murder happened and Paul was, shot in the chest. That was not the fatal shot. And then there was another shot that went through his neck and into his head. And Maggie was shot from several different angles and several different ways.
Because it looked like she was running away.
Well, I thought she was running towards Paul.
Oh,
she heard because that was the closing argument of the prosecutor, talking about how she was running towards her baby because she heard the shot. And she started running towards him. And then it looked like someone was trying to stop her and just started, because she was shot, the shooter circled around her. She was shot from several different angles, multiple times. So anyway, so then Alex claims that when he got back from visiting his parents, he shows up and finds their dead bodies there.
Yeah.
And then he calls the police at 10:20 and reports the shooting. But
yes,
I don't know what happened. I didn't follow the trial on television. Just saw snippets and clips and stuff. So
apparently, because this trial was not one on forensic evidence, because there wasn't
very
a lot,
little forensic evidence,
but it was really one on
cell phones
and technology and what his OnStar showed and what's
the
happening.
the
Snapchat video and also and the other one being that I was saying, oh shoot, just lost my train of thought, that it was one on technology. Hold on, I think I just went past on my notes here. I just lost my train of thought. Let's keep going. It was one on technology. There's some, it'll come back to me.
Well, because so basically they never recovered. Okay, so Paul was shot with a shotgun with a rifle, and apparently rifles leave very little forensic evidence behind. But Maggie was shot with a semi-automatic
AR-15
type rifle, which of course, you know, the Murdaughs owned a lot of guns, and they owned a gun just like that one. It's called like a Blackout 350 or 330 or something. Anyway, they own that type of a gun. They own lots of guns. No guns were ever confiscated from them. There was no raid or search the police left with no guns.
Yeah.
The blood stuff it's kind of confusing to me because, you know, the clothes that he had on when the police got there turns out it were not the clothes that he was wearing in like some videos that were taken like within 15 minutes of them being shot. Although the timeline of the murder is murky too.
Yeah.
You know, they said it at like 9:00, but they don't really know exactly what time it was. And so, yeah, it was like they didn't really investigate him.
Yeah,
they didn't. They kind of looked for those clothes. They were never found. They said that he had not blood splatter, but this other type of the high velocity impact spatter on his T-shirt that he had on when the police showed up. And that's something that you get when you shoot a rifle at close range. But he had a different shirt on.
Yeah, and apparently he had taken a shower.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
he had changed his clothes. So what... Yeah, I thought it was very weak and that's what I kept saying. I wasn't following the trial, watching it every day, but I was keeping up with it. And I kept saying, what is there forensically to tie him to this other than these imperfect cell phone records?
Yeah. Oh, this is what I was going to say. So apparently this came out in the trial where they now have all of his cell phone records that apparently like after he discovers the bodies that maybe I don't know if he called the police first, but he makes a ton of calls. And all of his calls...
like alibi type calls? Where he calls Maggie's phone, doesn't he?
He calls... You know what he does? He calls, I think, his family. He calls all these people. He also apparently... like looks up a restaurant. There was some like really innocuous things. Right. There was another one where he's sending someone a text message to the guy that runs the property saying, hey, like, can you feed the sunflowers? They're dying over here. Like basically to-do list things. Right. Like you're waiting for your kid's soccer game to end and you're writing, you're texting a to-do list.
He's trying to say, I wasn't killing anyone. I was on the phone like doing stuff. I
guess so.
I think he was trying to create an alibi because he called Maggie's phone. To show that he was, you know, concerned. He was coming home, trying to tell her whatever. He was making all these...
I think that, that was before that. But afterwards, even after he called the police and the police were there and they were figuring out the crime scene, he made a bunch of more innocuous phone calls that were like, what? And then apparently the 15th phone call he made was finally to his son, Buster, saying, hey, Buster, this is what's happened.
Oh, gosh.
So the thing is that I think that, right, so much of this was on the fact of how odd, right? If truly you come home and your wife and child are been shot to death,
not by you,
but by some stranger or someone else who has a vendetta out for your family, why aren't you calling your son Buster saying, Buster, get to safety. Where are you? Get here right now or get to a police station or get to somewhere. But Buster's like the 15th call. And that's the thing is that there is no rush because you did it. You know exactly who did it. And Buster's not in danger because you haven't shot him yet. So anyway, we see Nancy Grace. I just wrote Nancy Grace. But the police did start looking at the other kids. They started looking at Tony, because he had a pretty good reason for wanting to shoot Paul.
There were so many people who...
A lot of people wanted to shoot these people.
Had a lot of enemies.
Yes.
And like Alex, his brothers were saying that Paul had been receiving a lot of threats over the boating accident. So... yeah. Who knows?
So that basically ends the first 2 episodes, right? That's episode 2. And then episode 3 starts with we go back in time to these 2 other murders that are connected to this insane family.
Yeah.
Where we see the first one is July 8th, 2015. A body is found in the middle of the road, Stephen Smith. And we see this guy, Will Folks, who's an investigator, I guess, who was hired by Stephen's family. that apparently Stephen ran out of gas on his way home from somewhere. He started walking down the street, and at first you would think if you saw him in the middle of the street, you would think, oh, he got hit by a car, because these roads are dark and, you know, no one's out there. But immediately the police are like, well, no, because if he was struck by a car, he would be not in the middle of the road. He'd be on the side of the road. His body would be in a different position. His shoes would be off his feet. His clothes would be, you know,
well, also
it would look very different.
He only had head injuries. He didn't have any injury to anything below the neck. Like he was dumped there.
Yes. And Stephen was high school. He went to high school with all the kids, Miley, Mallory, Morgan.
Well, he was Buster's age, wasn't he?
Well, he said maybe he was Buster's age. The connection was
they all went to high school
because they all went to high school. That Stephen was really, really smart. Stephen was also gay and out, which is not in this low country. This is not an easy place to be gay. But he was out, and that Buster would, that I guess Stephen would tutor Paul.
Buster.
Stephen would tutor Buster a lot because, as we've all seen, that Buster doesn't do very well in school. And that they had this relationship, and that there were these rumors that were kind of going around about Buster and Stephen together, that they had a secret relationship. And so they're thinking, and this, I don't know if this has ever been corroborated or not, like that Stephen maybe he called his family and said, hey, I ran out of gas. And maybe they were like, well, call a tow truck or something. But then I think it sounds like he called Buster, and Buster's baseball game was ending. So Buster and a bunch of his friends
came with a bunch of guys.
To pick him up. And they found Stephen like down the road from where his car was.
It's extremely suspicious.
Yeah, the whole thing.
Basically, the police never investigated it. Buster was never interviewed.
And Buster, but when you look at all the police records, Buster's name was all over this.
But the police never
bothered. Yeah.
Never interviewed him. It was swept under the rug. It was like a Murdaugh special, and no one gave a crap about this kid.
Oh, that's right. And then apparently the day Stephen died, Randy Murdaugh, so this is
the brother of Alex.
Brother is the second. He called the family and offered to take the case free of charge, which is really interesting.
The case against who?
Basically because they're solicitors, right? So I think Randolph rushes in and says, I think to represent Stephen's family.
But there's no criminal case pending.
I don't know. This is my notes. That happened. But basically the same, exactly what you're saying, which is it's a Murdaugh special.
Yeah, they're just, someone comes in
and covers it up. And apparently there was a story in 2015 around Thanksgiving. Stephen's mom appeals to the community. And the article, does everything but name Murdaugh, but no one came forward. And Morgan tells the story of around this time, she had just started dating Paul, and she asked about the rumors about this thing, about, this death of this kid, of like, hey, your name's been linked to this thing. And the whole family, Maggie, Dad, Paul, all of them laughed and said, ha, 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 we would have had anything to do. We wouldn't have had killed that faggot, basically. And so that tells you that moment in time. And Morgan says this, she's like, that was my first red flag. And
that was her first red flag.
Like that was like,
there's some others.
And again, I think this F word is probably used a lot, maybe in low country. So it's not, here to us, it would be very shocking if anyone said that to our face. But it was just like, oh, Maggie too. Maggie, the kid. Now you can see this whole family. They have zero regard for human life, and they have zero regard for other people.
No, they don't.
Anyway.
Yeah. So then the other suspicious death happened.
And this one really confuses me, but go on. Yeah.
Okay. So it happened in 2018. So the Gloria Satterfield, who was the housekeeper, who also was, I guess, a caregiver to the boys, very close with Paul. So apparently this, just a couple of months before this incident happened, Alex took out a pretty big insurance policy on the property at Moselle. And then a few months later, she mysteriously falls down the stairs, hits her head, gets like, a brain bleed and, ends up passing away
2 days
from the
later.
head injury.
Well, the other thing was that, Gloria found drugs under the bed shortly before that. And she was very, very worried that would get her in trouble. Like Miss Maggie would think that she was snooping so she was very nervous.
Well, how did they know she found the drugs? Who did she tell?
Morgan talked about it. So I get the sense that maybe she told Paul. I don't know. Because Morgan then gets into the fact that everyone seemed to know that Alec had a problem with opiates and that there were times that she saw Alex detoxing from opiates, which is a rough, if you don't have Suboxone, it's a rough detox. So she talked about that. Again, Morgan, another red flag, but there was, and it's funny because they don't mention that insurance policy in the Netflix doc, but they do mention her finding the drugs. But now this makes a lot more sense to me now that I've heard about the insurance policy. Because I was really unclear about why her. I was like, did Maggie push her? Because the thing is, they blame the dogs. That apparently she was walking up these brick steps to the house. The dogs get underneath her. The dogs tripped her, and she falls back and hits her head. But apparently the dogs weren't anywhere near there.
Yeah, and I don't know. This was at this time when Paul was having severe financial problems, and it might even Alex. It might even been after he was fired from the law firm.
See, that's the other part. So in this Netflix doc, they don't talk about these financial crimes that he had, and I was trying to figure out what the timeline was for when. Obviously, he had some little scheme. Maybe he thought he was going to kill Gloria. Maybe he thought he was going to kill someone else on the property, but he was going to make sure that someone died on his property. Yeah. In 2018.
Yeah. And he got like $4 million.
4.3, which is crazy. Yeah. $4.3 million.
And of course, he comes in, he tells her family, oh, don't worry about it. I'm going to sue myself. I'm going to get this homeowner's insurance and I'm going to, give you money and set you up and whatever. He got the money. Yeah. But he got it for himself.
He never told them
about it. And they never got a penny of it. Super horrible. So yeah, if that was 2018 and 2019 was the boating accident. And yeah, so somewhere in here, the law firm, fired him because they found out about the
embezzlement. What year was that, though? What year did he get fired?
I don't know. That's a good question. But I have this note right after they were talking about these two murders. I have a note here about the law firm.
Oh, well, but the other thing was that what was interesting is Alex lies again about this because apparently the family, there's this PI trying to investigate this murder as well. And
which murder?
Of Miss Gloria.
Okay.
So the PI talks to the caretaker who is there at the property that day. And he's the one that gets a call from Maggie saying, Gloria fell. Come down here. Oh, my God. But apparently Alex says that he spoke to Gloria. So after she fell, when she was like in and out of consciousness, she's on the ground. Alex claims that he talked to Gloria and she said, the dogs tripped me.
Oh, please.
So he claims that, but Alex was never there.
Right. He was never there, but he told the police he was. Yeah. And he had this little conversation with her. But yeah, that's just a big lie.
Well, but hold on. Then isn't this part of where everything starts to fall apart? Because then I think the murder of, you're right that it was June 7th, because on June 22nd, that same year of 2021, that's when they open up Stephen's death, that case again. And this was like, then all the financial stuff was happening too. And that's when things started to shatter, right? Like everything, because after the deaths of Maggie and Paul, everything started coming out. Like all the skeletons started coming out, right?
Well, and mind you, he still hasn't been charged, so yeah, September,
I think it was June of 2021 he was forced to resign. That's what it says. That's what I have too here in my notes.
Okay, well, that's the same time as the murder.
Okay.
And then in September of 21, that's when he's shot in the head while allegedly changing a tire. And he tried to say it was a suicide attempt, that he hired someone so that Buster could get a life insurance policy on his life. And he said that he asked his drug dealer to shoot him. And this drug dealer, this guy, Curtis Smith, he denies. He said that Alex called him out there to come out and stage a struggle with the gun. Now, Alex had paid this guy, Curtis Smith, like $160,000. They called him, in the ledger, they called him Cousin Eddie. It's like C.E. Smith. And they showed all these payments. This was supposedly his drug dealer. And then there was a guy who said that, even if he had the worst pill addiction ever, like $160,000, that's enough pills for 14 years.
No. 114 years. If
114 years?
I thought he said 114 years. $160,000 worth of opiates? I thought he said 114 years. All right,
well,
I have to go back and figure
I don't know how much
years.
This costs or how many pills.
But this is you can't take all these pills.
No,
you just can't.
I think this whole opioid addiction was a farce.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
I think he was really addicted, but I think that was all the money that he stole. I think some of it went to the pills, but I think a lot of it went to other things.
Yeah, no, it did. And we'll get more into that later, but some theories that people have. But yeah, so then Alex is trying to make this guy, Eddie, look like a suspect in both incidents.
Yeah, well, I think, the whole idea was it was a setup that basically, if it all had worked out properly, it would look like this guy this Eddie guy killed Paul, Maggie, and then tried to kill Alex. And then Alex is trying to save his life, would kill him. And then that way he would be a dead man. So he couldn't talk. And so he can then go, see, this is the real murderer. He killed all these people and he hurt me. And here I go.
Yeah. And this thing about the suicide attempt, I think that was just something he made up.
He's too much of a narcissist. He's too much of a crazy person to commit suicide.
He made that up after this all went
to make it look good.
So then finally something starts happening. After this, the police can no longer ignore how fucking insane this is. And so they start to actually suspect him. They get a search warrant. And this was very confusing to me. At first, they said they took 8 guns from Moselle, but then Buster and John Martin were there, and
Marvin,
they also took out some guns
because they got that YouTuber guy who was like, because he heard through the grapevine, like, oh, they're going to be finally the police are going to go and serve the search warrant and search this property. So he's like, well, I can't get out there. And when he got out there, he's like, oh, no one's here. Maybe I missed it. And he's like, well, I'm going to put my drone up there. And so he has all this drone footage of no police, just Buster and John Marvin loading up a bunch of guns and a bunch of other stuff.
So then the police came after that when all the bad guns were gone?
Yes, I think so. Because the guy was like, wait, he thought he missed the raid. He thought he missed it because no one was there. So it was almost like they had the search warrant. Maybe they told Buster and John, like, hey, the search warrant's supposed to be happening here. Yeah. We'll come in an hour later, something, you guys get your stuff and go. It was so suspicious.
The police don't even have the guns. They don't even get the guns. They don't find a gun to connect it. So, but at least they finally have started to suspect him, and things start to
move. But it's so interesting too, because other things, like as this is going, like the coroner, apparently Gloria Satterfield, she never had an autopsy. An autopsy was never done. And so, they start looking into that. They start looking into Stephen Smith. I really hope that there is a resolution for this Gloria and for Stephen Smith. I mean, and I really, do the Murdaughs have any money? But I really, truly hope that these families recoup
I was going to say, where are they going to?
Mallory's family, all of these families.
I think they're pretty broke.
Well, I hope they all have to just fucking sit around and get 9 to 10 o'clock at night jobs where they have to make, minimum wage.
Yeah. Well, somebody just purchased Moselle, like a neighbor, someone who has a neighboring property, just purchased it for $4 million. And, but he probably has so many liabilities and debts that, there's not going to be anything left over.
But where did all that money go? So did all of that money go? Well, you have your theories. Well, but anyway, sorry, I just keep believing this.
Here's an interesting little fact about Moselle. and this ties into maybe where some of this money went. So he bought Moselle in 2013 for $5.
Wow.
From the wife of a client who was a major drug smuggler. And then mysteriously, all the charges against this guy were dismissed after a government witness was mysteriously struck and killed by a car.
Wow.
So there's a theory that this money was drug smuggling money. And it was because the property that the Murdaughs owned, I was talking about, this property they have on the river, it's perfect geographically for drug cartels for access. And this property that he owned in Beaufort County was a perfect kind of lookout spot for drug cartels bringing this stuff in through the Low Country, before it gets on to the mainland. So that's a theory. Anyway, I forget where we were.
Oh, well, it's just we're towards the end of the Netflix show where we see, because obviously this Netflix thing was completed before everything that's happened. But the end of the show, we see he's actually arrested.
Well, yeah,
not for these murders, but he was first arrested by SLED, the investigation of stealing Gloria's son's money. I think that was what got him arrested the first time. 10/19/2021, he gets arrested on that, and then that's 4 months after the murders, and then the judge actually denies him bond, which was huge. Then we see that same month, Buster and John are at a casino in Vegas. I don't know why that was happening, why we needed to know that. But a year later, all the forensic evidence is released, and then the coroner was able to say that they believe that Paul and Maggie were killed at 9 p.m. Alex says he didn't get to Moselle until 10. And then this is that whole high velocity impact spatter that was found on his clothes.
Which places him in the vicinity of where the murders happened.
Yeah. And then also there's the infamous video from Paul's phone at 8:44 p.m., where everyone swears that's Alex and they can hear him talking in the background.
And there was another Snapchat video, which I think was a little bbit before this, where they show Alex, he's like pushing a tree down, or he's like messing with a tree. There's like this like newly planted tree, and Paul's taking this video, and that's where you see what clothes he has on. He kind of has like a light blue polo shirt and like some khaki pants. And that was right before, I think, the dog video where you hear his voice. I think that might have come out later. Anyway, we have that.
So that just shows that it doesn't prove that he killed them, but it does prove that, number one, he was lying, and it also proves that he was there, and it proves that he does know who killed them. I mean, there is that.
Well,
maybe it doesn't prove
back
that.
Up here.
Okay.
So the Snapchat video is at 8:44. Okay, the prosecution is placing the time of death at 9 p.m. That's not precise. That there's like wiggle room in there. When you're talking about something that's happening so quickly, a couple of minutes can make a difference. So, and I'm not like defending him. I'm just playing devil's advocate here.
Yeah, no.
And the defense they really attacked a lot of this, because basically the only evidence that the prosecution has is this timeline that's made up of, Snapchat videos, GPS data, cell phone data, whatever.
Well, but they also have him lying about, basically.
But the guy lies about everything.
Yeah, but they also have a witness. They have the caretaker of his parents, who he told to say, I've been here 40 minutes. And she's like, no, you've been here 20. And then they have evidence to back up her claims.
Right. So I'm just saying, this is not beyond a reasonable doubt.
No, that's true.
And the thing is that, in a minute, we'll talk about what the jurors said. And the jurors really hung their hat on this Snapchat video. Like, that was it for them.
Yeah.
And the fact that he lied about it was it for them. This guy lies about everything. That doesn't mean he's a murderer.
Yes, that is true. That is true.
Anyway,
let's get into that in a second. So we see at the end that July 20th, 2022, we see him in court. He faces 2 counts of murder. He pleads not guilty. And then at the very end of the series, we check in with all the kids. It looks like Miley and Connor are still together after all these years. They seem like they're together. Tony, has really, poor guy, really struggled. And it seems like he's back on track. And Morgan is healing herself, and she says that Mallory saved me because I would have been in this, and maybe she would have been sitting right next to Paul. She might be dead if she had stayed with Paul, because it was such a destructive relationship. Mm-hmm. And the final thing is they're exhuming the body of Gloria. So hopefully those kids in that family can get some justice or peace or something. And I hope they get some money, because God, $2 million for both of those kids, that would have changed their lives. That would have been, huge. And he just steals it. Steals it. It's just so shitty.
It's a total thief.
Ugh. Anyway, tell me what you found.
A lot of and also too, there's been a lot of discussion about this whole case about motive, and why did he do this?
I want to know, what do you think the motive is?
Well, okay. First, I want to say that the prosecution's not required to show motive.
Yes.
They usually try to, because it has to make sense to a jury, because we need to know. People need to have a story. They need to understand. But technically, you don't have to show motive. So at trial, the motive that the prosecution used was the evidence of these financial crimes. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that's going to be argued on appeal is that it was improper for the judge to admit all of these evidence of the financial crimes, because they're basically trying to use character to show conduct. So like if you've lied in the past or you've done bad things in the past, then that means you're doing bad things now. I mean, that's the inference people. And so they try to not let stuff like that in. But there are exceptions where you can use past bad acts or crimes to prove that you committed a new crime. Or excuse me, you can't use past bad actions or crimes to prove you committed this crime, except to prove a specific motive, a common plan, or absence of mistake or an accident. So, so they claim that this is motive driven, that the motive to kill his wife and son was because his financial world was crumbling. I still don't see that.
Yeah. Well, why kill Paul? I can see. So obviously we see this all the time. If you watch enough Dateline NBC, you know that people kill spouses all the time for very small reasons, for insurance policies, because they hate them, because of this, because of that. Right. So I can see Maggie, I can see that part, the financial part. If she's hiring a forensic accountant, if she's digging into things, if she's getting close and you want to stop her, why Paul?
Yeah. Well, just to go back to Maggie, everything was in her name.
What?
Yes.
Oh.
Because Alex was so shady, like all their properties, like everything was in her name. And I don't know if South Carolina is a community property state. Probably not. Everything was in her name. So if she dies, everything goes to him. And and they probably were headed for divorce.
Because apparently he cheated on her a lot. That hasn't been talked about as much. But apparently he cheated on her
but
a
I
lot.
wouldn't doubt it. And so she'd been to a lawyer. So that is that's a total financial thing. But why kill Paul? But some people have said that, like, if Paul, well, first of all, Paul had criminal charges and civil. He had the wrongful death case.
Yes.
Mallory's family brought a wrongful death case. So if he would have lived and he would have had to face criminal charges and then the wrongful death case, I mean, he could have gotten a big judgment against him, but he was an adult.
Yeah.
Like, Alex wouldn't have been liable for that. So really, there was no reason. I mean, Alex talked about how he was going to spend the rest of his life, clearing Paul's name over this boat accident thing. And it's like, well, that's stupid.
God.
Like,
it's been proven, buddy.
So there's really no financial link to that. And I feel like all this guy really cared about was money. So Paul was not really a financial liability on him. His wife was.
Yeah. Well, so I've heard some different theories about the Paul stuff. I think one theory is that Paul brought shame to the family, right? I mean, even Buster, your superstar, is a plagiarist. So, I mean, I don't know why Paul is the horrible one, but Paul's done a lot
Paul's
worse.
not the only one who's brought shame to the family.
You know, but that would be one piece of like that this, you know, if Paul's gone, that maybe it erases the Mallory situation and maybe people wouldn't pay attention to them or whatever it is. It's one way to take care of that. Another theory that I've heard is that he killed Paul to save him from going to prison. One thing that I've heard people say like, oh, but he's like 5'8" and 160 pounds. He wouldn't do well in prison and blah, blah, blah. And it's
he's
little bit
rich.
Yeah, that's my other thing. People
he can put money on other people's books.
That's what I was gonna say.
Just like Alex was doing.
Yeah.
He was calling up saying, can you put some money on this guy's canteen?
Yes.
That's how you survive.
Yeah. So that was my other thing. I said, everyone's like, oh, he'd be someone's girlfriend. I'm like, well, hold on a second. You know, like, yeah, he's young and delicate features, but he would go in there and he would figure out how many soups do you need? How many top ramens do you need?
Right.
And he would just
top ramen for everybody.
Yeah, everybody. You know, he's wealthy, so he's a cash cow. They need him alive and well and working for them. So it's not an automatic that he would be quote unquote in trouble in prison.
Also, people have been watching too many prison movies.
I know.
It doesn't really work.
Listen, it's there. It happens.
But...
we know it happens. It's real. But it's also, it's not sort of like what we see in movies where the minute someone walks through the door, you're done for. It's a little bit longer. It's more subtle. It's a lot of other things. And if you are wealthy and you can keep people in soups and top ramens and stamps
and like lawyers,
get phone lawyers cards, for them. Other things, then you will be fine. You will make people happy.
Yeah. That's what I always say. If I ever have to go to prison, I'm going to walk in there and I'm going to go up to like the person who's the head bitch in charge and be like, I'll do all your appeals. Yes. I'll do all your girlfriend's appeals.
Yes.
Just let me know whatever you want. Just, take care of me.
I would be everybody's therapist and I would do free therapy. And I mean, but again, I think that's what's always interesting. Female prisons and female prisoners and male prisons are so different. Mm-hmm. Like women, it's like, I always feel like if I went to prison, I'm like, I think I'd meet a really nice lady. I think she would treat me really nicely. And I think we would have a lovely life together. Do you know what I mean?
They're very into building families.
Yes.
In women's prisons, they have families and they call, there's a father.
Yeah.
And then there's like mothers, probably like multiple. And then there's like daughters. I mean, and they each have their own roles. Yes. And it's a whole system.
I think I would find a nice group of people and a nice family to be with. Women are so different in that way. I mean, there's very violent women and crazy women in prison, but like, it's so different than how men are and how they are when they're captured together and how their relationships are. Like women are like, come on in,
Right. The men are very territorial.
Yeah. And it's much more about control and power. Right. And women want power, but it's much more about like creating something. So I always felt like I'd meet someone nice and she and we have a good life together. And
well, let's hope we never find out.
Yes. But
let's hope it doesn't come to that.
I don't want that. I'm just saying. I'd figure out how to cope.
Okay.
All right. Tell us what the jurors. I've heard a little bit from the jurors.
Yes. Okay. So a couple jurors have come out to say some things. So there's one juror who's 22 years old, and he didn't give a recorded interview. It was a written interview, but there's a picture of him, and he has hard to explain. He has a necktie that's kind of like a Constitution theme.
Oh, God.
It has like some flag type things, but then it has, how they have the picture of the Constitution written in the long hand. There's like a part of that on there, on some old timey like paper. It was interesting.
Yeah,
something you'd see at like a Republican convention or something. Yes. But anyway, he said that, the initial vote was 9-3. Okay, so 9 guilty, 3 not guilty. Another juror actually said that of the 3, 2 were straight out not guilties, and 1 was maybe undecided. So this 22-year-old, he said that the video of Alex at the scene, meaning the one where you can hear his voice, we know that Paul took with the dog, did it for them. But then here we get into the emotions of people. This is really scary. He says, the fact that Paul knew to film Cash is the dog, in order to put Alex at the scene, Paul was speaking to them as someone who couldn't speak for himself, but he wanted to be a witness. And he said all the jurors really connected to Paul. And he especially connected to Paul because he's 22, the same age as Paul when he died. So he felt connected to him.
Oh, Lordy.
I know.
This is why I recently had jury duty and I went there and then the case got dismissed. So I got to leave pretty quickly. But you just look around and you're just like, this is not a group of my peers. I do not want this guy with the Constitution thing deciding my life. Like, no. And listen, do I think Alex did it? Yes. Do I think these people are awful and he needs to spend the rest of his life in prison? Yes. But I'm with you. I don't know if it's beyond reasonable doubt.
Yeah.
I don't know. You're right. And I thought, because this is what I read, and I think it was the same guy, I just didn't see him with this tie. I thought that what it was they all determined that is his voice. He is there. And that combined with all of the lies and all of the things that he told us was enough circumstantial evidence. I didn't think it was that he was speaking through him. That's crazy making.
Right. No, and that's the thing, that the level of evidence that they required to convict this guy to me seems low.
Yeah.
And if that's what they hung their hat on, because there was
I think they've got a good appeal, right? I mean,
well, it's very hard with the jury. You know, you can't second guess the jurors, only if there's jury misconduct of some sort. You know, if that's the problem, is that if a juror thinks something, that's what they think. If that's what they deduced from this entire trial, then okay, it's extremely hard to overturn any conviction or verdict or anything on like lack of evidence or in civil law. It's like there's not substantial evidence is the standard, and it's hard. Yeah, because they trust the trier of fact, whether it's a jury or a judge. I mean,
and sorry, was the trial in Hampton County?
No, it was in, I think, a neighboring county, Cozell County.
Okay, so yeah, I figured as much. They had to leave that county and get away from all of that.
Well, yeah, I don't know why it was in the other county, or maybe it was in Hampton County. I kind of feel like it was but it was literally just like the neighboring. I don't know. I'm going to stop talking because I'm not really sure.
Huh. Okay.
I'm not really sure, but it wasn't far if it was a different county.
Yes.
I'm sure they still knew. And this juror also said that visiting the murder scene helped prove the prosecution's I don't know anyway, it was ironic because it was the defense attorney who asked if the jurors could go see Moselle and go see the scene. And it kind of backfired on him because the jurors thought it helped them. So, and he also said that the prosecution motive was not persuasive. The whole financial issue thing, they were not persuaded by that.
Oh, they didn't think that was a reason why he did it. They still think he did it.
Right. Okay. They just thought that this was something bad happened and he did it. And he said, people do things that don't make sense.
Oh, God, these people. Okay. Well, and I was listening. We should probably wrap up in a minute.
All right. I have one other
hold on real quick. So the other thing is people were talking about how Alec Murdaugh just for him to take the stand is huge, right? Usually defense attorneys don't want their clients to take the stand. And that things were so bad that he had to take the stand and admit to lying and all of the financial crimes. But
he didn't have to.
He didn't have to, but he did.
But why?
But yeah, so that's my question to you, because I kept hearing people say, "Oh my God, he's taking the stand," which means that the defense doesn't have much of anything.
No.
So do you think that was a bad?
Disagree.
So you think as defense counsel, you would have been like, Alec, shut up and sit down.
Here's the thing: if your client is intent on testifying, that's their right.
Yeah.
And you can try to talk to them out of it till you're blue in the face. But at the end of the day, if they insist, you have no choice. I guarantee you these lawyers said, don't do it.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, if they didn't, that's crazy. Because if he doesn't testify, it all hangs on reasonable doubt. And I'm not saying it would have necessarily made a difference in the outcome of this case, but that's the whole point of our legal system, is that the burden is on the prosecution to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. And when you start opening your mouth and you start opening as the defense, as the defendant, when you start talking, you're opening doors, because there's all these rules about things that can't be discussed until the defendant brings it up. And all you're doing is hurting your case. Because I'm sorry, whether you're talking to the police or you're on trial or a jury, you cannot talk your way out of stuff. When was the last time someone testified on their own behalf and was acquitted? I mean, I'm trying to even think. It doesn't happen that much. It just seems to. There's times where you have to, if you're claiming self-defense, because that's an affirmative defense, you have to testify. But just make the prosecutors prove it. And that's hard. That's a hard enough job for them to do it. And so I don't, it was terrible for him. And he didn't have to get up there and admit anything. He didn't have to get up there and talk about the financial stuff. He didn't have to talk about any of it. And they could have just left it out there. But no, now that clearly it influenced the jurors. If the juror is sitting here saying that, well, he lied, he got up and he lied, that's not helpful. But anyway, okay, so then there was another juror and he was the one who clarified that two people at the outset were not guilty, one was unsure. And this is what amazes me. They flipped these three people in 45 minutes.
Yeah. And that surprised me too, because I was under the impression when it came back so quickly, I was like, okay, they must have been pretty close to unanimous, and they wanted lunch. And they wanted to kibitz a little and make sure that they did that. But the fact that they flipped two people from not guilty to guilty, was one undecided.
Well, so that's still,
but three people in 45 minutes. What do you think? How do you do that?
I don't know. I mean, jury dynamics are interesting because, it's not just the individual jurors. It's how people can be influenced by other people, and you get certain personalities that can be very aggressive. And a lot of people will just change because they feel intimidated or someone says something to the effect of, which is what people do all the time when they manipulate them, which is like, oh, we've been here so long. I want to get home to my children and we're here and come on, can't you just see they're terrible people? It's 9 to 3, we
know. Right.
Yeah. And oh my gosh. Yeah. And this guy was actually being interviewed, and the person interviewing was saying, well, how did you, make this, how did you come to this conclusion so quickly? And he was like, well, all of our deliberating.
All 45
minutes of it. And he's also said that Alex's voice on the video at the crime scene was the clincher. And he said he also didn't see any remorse or compassion from Murdaugh on the stand, and that he didn't see any tears.
Yeah.
Which we all saw him on the stand. He was blubbering and I thought he was crying. Anyway, it just goes to show you,
the jury system is such an F system. It really, I'm sorry, this has to be, I understand the thought process behind it, but I've thought this for a while, that the jury stuff doesn't work, that every time I get called for jury duty, it feels like it's just this thing of people trying to figure out, what do I need to say to get out of this?
Nobody wants to be there.
Nobody wants to be there. And I've been there where there's been a few people, one person who got their green card, they're like, I'm so happy to be here. This is why I came to this country. And
please get on the jury.
But the thing is
take my place.
People like myself, I'm a good example where I cannot claim financial hardship. But it is, for me to get on a jury, it is financial hardship.
It is a financial hardship. You're going to be there for several weeks.
Yeah. If I'm there several weeks, that either means that I lose several weeks worth of income, which would hit me hard, which wouldn't be good. Or I would be at the jury all day, seeing clients all night for weeks, and that would be too much. So the minute I get those summons, I'm thinking about, and it's not hard for me to get out of juries. I have many times, because all I need to do is tell them that my father and sister are attorneys. I just kind of throw stuff out and make them seem like I know too much and I'm an asshole. So I'm just like, but the thing is that the problem is that I think I would make a good juror. I think I would be good there. The problem is that financially, I can't do it. So I'm instantly sort of like, this is a burden.
Yeah, you're on the defensive.
And so it's not like my husband who has a company that will pay for him to be gone for a week or two.
Yeah.
I can't. So
if you're self-employed,
it's not and it's not fair.
Well,
and
here's a trick. Okay. So like, this is what our dad always uses as an excuse. Cause he gets called for jury duty. He lives in a small town, gets called for jury duty all the time. And he says it would be a hardship for my clients. So,
I got to do that.
So you
hardship
take it.
For my clients.
It would be a hardship for your clients. Take it off of yourself
and put it on my clients.
Put it on the clients.
That's interesting. But it used to be when I first got called for jury duty when I was like 22, the first case I was on, which was a child molestation case, by the way. They, at that time, you could claim hardship. And I didn't for some reason. I didn't, but then you could. But now, really, to claim hardship, you really have to show that your whole life was going to fall apart. And I'm like, well, no, my whole life's not going to fall apart. But yeah, I'd have to dip into savings or do this or borrow money from somewhere I don't really want to borrow money from. And that is a hardship. Or I'd have to figure it out. It would really do me in. And I wouldn't be happy to be there. And I think this is part of this system is that people who have to be on these, the O.J. Simpson's a great example. People have to be on these trials for a long, long time. I understand being sequestered. I understand the process of it, but it really makes it very hard. And so by the time you get to deliberations, I think these people just want to make a decision and go. And so, and it's not your life. It's not your family. It's not any of that. So it's very easy to just be like, okay.
Well, yeah. And this whole thing about deliberating, you're supposed to go through all the evidence and discuss it and weigh the evidence, whatever. But, people, they're not going to do that because they've already decided what they feel about the evidence by the time they get in there. And so they really don't deliberate. And so I think what it comes down to is that it's like if it's a criminal case and someone's holding out, you got to, however long it takes to, flip those people. Or even in a civil case, you have to have, in California, you have to have 9 out of 3. So then it becomes a numbers game and, the dynamic of the jury and who can convince who. But I would venture to say that there's not a lot of actual deliberating going on in most cases. Some juries do. I'm not saying all. But yeah, it's a weird system. And I just feel like these people thought, well, look, this guy, he's done so many fucked up things. This is a horrible family. And also, they probably just wanted to get rid of this family. They wanted to get him off the streets.
Yes.
They wanted to, cut off their legs so that these people could not terrorize Hampton County in the Low Country anymore. It was just like, let's get rid of these people.
Yeah. Because if you didn't kill these two people, trust me, you've killed someone else.
Right.
You've done it something else. So
yeah, they're not a sympathetic bunch.
So yeah, and I'll be honest, if I was on that jury and I saw all that in reasonable doubt, I think it's very easy to, what you're saying, go to that leap to that place of being like, I don't know if this is reasonable doubt, but I'm pretty sure he did it. And he did all these other things. So let's just lump it all together.
Yeah.
Anyway, we should wrap this up. This is almost an hour and a half.
Oh, wow.
I know.
This was quite a case, quite a trial. And
I'm sure we are like the last people to cover it. We wait till the very, very, very end.
Hey, at least we got to talk about it all at once.
We got it all done.
This is a true wrap up.
Yes.
From beginning to end.
Alec is going to be in prison. He's going to be trading soups. He's going to be doing God knows what in there. Hopefully,
be working on his appeal.
Listen, hopefully Buster can move away from these people, start a new life. I don't know. Maybe come out as gay if he's gay, right, Buster? Don't be a lawyer. You don't want to be a lawyer. Come out here to San Francisco and be gay, right? Or just live your life.
But he
Buster.
seems to be very close to that uncle.
Yes, I know.
He seems to be close to both of his uncles. And there was a picture of the Buster and the two uncles walking into the courtroom. They're quite full of themselves. They've really got that good old boy kind of walk and talk.
Well,
and
Buster's
mentality.
not going to do it.
I don't think Buster's going to go far.
I don't know. Buster, I think, has a girlfriend or something, but I mean, that doesn't mean anything.
Whatever.
But I don't know. I hope Gloria's children, Miss Gloria's children get some money out of this and some peace, and Mallory's family and Morgan and Miley and all those kids, Tony, I hope they all find, some peace in all of this and they can move forward. Because
it's a sad story.
Because these kids are 23 years old. Yeah. I mean, that's the other part of it too. They have been through so much.
Yeah, it's a lot of trauma.
All right, we'll wrap it up, Brooke.
Okay. If you made it this far, you're a super fan. Thank you. And we appreciate your support. If you like the podcast, please subscribe. Please give us a 5-star rating and give us a review. And we would really appreciate that. So until next time.
All right, you guys.
Signing off.
Bye.
Bye.
Howdy, howdy, ho, and welcome to Fantasy Fan Fellas. I'm Hayden, producer of the Fantasy Fangirls podcast and your resident lover of all things Sanderson.
And I'm Steven, your bookish internet goofball, but you can call me the Smash Daddy.
And we are currently deep diving Brandon Sanderson's fantasy epic, Mistborn. But here's the catch. Steven here has not read Mistborn before.
That's right, hey. So each week, you'll get my unfiltered, raw reactions to every single chapter.
And along the way, we'll do character deep dives, magic explainers, and Steven will even try to guess what's next. Spoiler alert, he'll be wrong.
Newsflash, I'm never wrong. Episodes come out every Wednesday, and you can find Fantasy Fan Fellas wherever you get your podcasts.
With almost 500,000 customers and over $1 trillion of secure payments, Bill isn't new to intelligent finance. It's the proven way to simplify bill pay and maximize cash flow. Want to learn more? Visit Bill.com/proven for a special offer.
Give me a mountain with lots to do. Give me the sunshine, give me a dew. Give me something simple and true. All I need is sunshine and a cool, refreshing mountain dew. So give me my good friends, give me a dew.
Grab some friends and an ice-cold Mountain Dew today.
Mountain Dew.